Hello, welcome back to the Intel with Greg Cosell. I'm Jeff Mosher with Adam Kaplan from Inside the Birds. And of course, we bring in the godfather of tape breakdown, Greg Cosell. And Greg, I don't know if you know this, but our listeners and commenters on YouTube like to refer to you as the godfather. So you are now.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
All
Not
right.
grandfather. I didn't say grandfather.
He is so.
Godfather. Just to be clear.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So you are the godfather of tape breakdown. And this is
So I'm going to make you guys an offer you can't refuse, huh?
Apparently.
Exactly. If I make one more old joke, I might be sleeping with the fishes. But
That's right. With Luca Brasi.
We are going to start off this series that we do every year. We're going to go through every single draft position on offense and defense. We are going to save Greg from breaking down long snappers and kickers. We're just going to do offense and defense. And we're going to start the series with today's episode looking at everybody's favorite position group, the edge rushers. And it is an interesting and exciting class of edge rushers, Greg. In general, did you when you watch so much tape, do things jump out at you from a class standpoint year to year? Like, oh yeah, this is a good bunch of edges, or is it you just watch?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always players. One thing I always notice on tape are the difference between the guys that are really good athletes but don't really know how to rush the quarterback versus the guys that sort of have a plan and a feel and use their hands and have a sense of how to do it. And that's what makes it interesting, because sometimes the really, really good athletes, and there's a couple in this class, and we'll obviously be speaking about them, sometimes those guys, coaches get excited because the athletic traits are so high level, and then they always feel they can teach them how to rush the quarterback. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, as we know. So, that always fascinates me when I watch tape. And, there's a particular guy in this class like that. We'll get to him. But, and then there's others that seemingly have a plan and an understanding of how to go about it. Like Latu last year was a great example of a guy that had a plan, understood how to do it, understood how to use his hands. Not necessarily a powerful guy, whereas Jared Verse was sheer power. And that translated to the league, as we saw.
Yeah, both of those guys had pretty good years, but certainly Jared Verse, as we saw. All right, so let's start it off. Adam put this list together with a little bit of my input, so I don't want anybody to accuse me of homerism or favoritism. This guy is a legit prospect. He's very awesome. He is Abdul Carter out of Penn State. Greg, what does his tape show?
Yeah, I mean, he's your classic case of a guy that has just really, really high-level athletic traits. I mean, he's not a hard evaluation because you're talking about a guy that has size, length, natural suddenness, explosiveness, first step, get off. There's really not a lot to say that probably hasn't been said. He's probably a guy that could play 4-3 end or outside linebacker in a 5-2 front. They used him a lot at Penn State, as you probably know, Jeff, as an inside joker in third down and pure pass situations where he would work against guards and centers, much in the way Micah Parsons is deployed by the Cowboys. He's not as physically powerful as Micah Parsons, but I'm just talking about the way he's deployed. And my guess is that will be similar to the way he is then deployed in the NFL. But you're dealing with a really explosive, high-level athlete.
Greg, do you look at him and say, because again, you're watching a couple hundred players. Is he among the top 2 or 3 players you've watched on tape, regardless of offense or defense?
Probably. I mean, I'm not great at making lists, as you guys know, and when I watch guys, I don't necessarily think like that. But you're dealing with a guy that it just some guys just jump off the tape in the way that they move. There's not many like that, by the way, so I don't want to make it seem like there's, 50 guys every year that jump off the tape, but you're dealing with a guy that has that kind of athleticism to him. It's, the term we often use is suddenness or twitch. People are probably familiar with these terms. People in the scouting business use those terms a lot, as you guys well know. And you see that immediately with Carter. He's just, I'll give you a great example. I remember when he was a freshman, he was playing stack backer, and Penn State always has really good defenders. So I was watching Penn State that year. I can't remember who the defenders were that year. You may remember Jeff 2 years ago, who came out at Penn State then, but he was the best player on the Penn State defense as a freshman. You noticed him immediately. He just looked quicker and faster than everybody else, and he was playing stack backer then. And then obviously they moved him this year to essentially edge pass rusher, which obviously is a far more premium position in the NFL than stack backer. But he just jumps off the tape. There's my guess is that most people in the NFL, all 32 teams, will have him as a top 3 or top 4 player on their board, if not number 1 in some cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to your point, Greg, the reason why he was not an edge rusher until this last year, and by the way, after the first 4 weeks of this past season, there were some people questioning whether they should have moved him to the edge or not. He did not get off to the greatest start. I'm not sure how many games you watched, but there was questions. But if you go back 2 years, like you were referring to, well, Penn State had Chop Robinson on one end, and they had a guy, I want to say Adisa Isaac, I think, on the other end.
Right. They had Isaac and Robinson. Now I remember. I just couldn't. Yeah, they had both those guys, and obviously Robinson was really good and had an excellent rookie season with Miami. So yeah, he played stack backer.
Right. Yeah. So let me ask you, for a guy who really has only played the edge for 1 year, is Carter, for what he has in athleticism, is he still coming together as far as having a plan, using his hands? Is that not natural yet for him?
Yeah, I mean, without question. I mean, some of the weaknesses that I mentioned, and the way I do this is for people that don't know, is I have a prospect evaluation sheet where I have strengths, weaknesses, transition, and other. So under weaknesses, I put must learn to extend his arms with force to better take on and play off blocks in the run game to keep his legs clean. This is something he's not necessarily doing as a stack backer. Needs to develop more of a power game as a pass rusher. Obviously that's not something he had to do as a linebacker.
Right.
I said still developing complete pass rush plan. Showed some efficient hand usage, but too often relied primarily on athleticism. So there's obviously things that need to be worked on once he gets to the league. But I guarantee, and assuming he's a good kid, there's no coach that's not going to want to work with this kid because you feel like you can make this guy a great player.
Greg, when we look at the next tier, and everyone will have their own rankings. I know you're not a rankings guy, but I know a lot of people around the league are impressed and intrigued with JamesPearce from Tennessee. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, JamesPearce, and he's an interesting guy because body type is really interesting. He's kind of long and lean. I mean, I think he was 6'5", 245 at the combine, and it's funny because when I was there watching him in the dome, he's tall, but he almost looked like a safety. So you're dealing, he's one of those guys that you want to align him wide with space and a runway to generate that explosive burst and speed to challenge offensive tackles. You want to give him a runway. That's really what this guy is. I think he needs to get stronger overall. And I think he's young too. I think he's only 20 or 21. I could be wrong on that. But I think he is young. But you're dealing with another high level athlete. He definitely has suddenness. He definitely has twitch. I think the power element, while it's there at times, remains somewhat a work in progress. And the reason I'm going to constantly mention power, and the reason I'm doing that, guys, this is something I learned. I try to keep learning every year. This is something I learned going to the O-line masterminds in Frisco, Texas, with Duke Manyweather, Jeff Schwartz, Lane Johnson. All these offensive tackles, all they talk about as a starting point is you have to be able to beat me with power. If you can't beat me with power, then it's much easier for me because at some point you have to get through me to the quarterback. I may have mentioned this before, but I had a great conversation 2 years ago with Andrew Whitworth, who was at the O-line masterminds. And he said, look, the guys that are athletic and dance around, he said, I let them dance because eventually they got to get through me.
Yeah.
So that's why in these, as we speak today, and we talk about these guys, I'm going to constantly mention power because that's what I learned from guys who play O-line, that it's about power as the starting point. So that's why a guy like JamesPearce, you get really excited watching the athleticism, but the power game is a work in progress.
Greg, Nolan Smith would be a great example.
Great example.
There were so many people around the league who were saying, you know what, I don't know if this guy can make it. And remember, we would talk to you about Nolan Smith before the season started.
Wow.
And you pointed out, unless he starts winning with power, he's just not going to win.
Well, it's funny you say that because I know the individual in the Eagles Eagles organization that worked with him. I happen to be good friends with him. And we had this conversation like week 2 or 3 when it looked like he was not going to be a good player. And I basically told him, I'm not taking credit for Nolan Smith, believe me, but I basically told him, you need to develop with this kid some kind of power game. You need to have him develop how to use his hands, how to do something so that there's a power, because power encompasses a lot of things, guys. We're not talking about just running through a guy. I want to make that clear.
Yeah.
We're talking about being able to play with contact. However you choose to do it, there's multiple ways to do it, but you have to be able to play with contact. And I spoke to the guy who worked with him, and, to this day, he credits me with kind of getting him, teaching him the right way to do it. Not that I couldn't sit there and explain all the right moves and all that. I know some, but you're right, Adam. That's a great example. You have to have some kind of power game as an edge pass rusher in the NFL.
Greg, let's go down to Marshall, where Eagles fans may be familiar with the Vinny Curry pick from 2012. He came out of Marshall, defensive end. This year, Mike Green from Marshall. What stands out about him?
Yeah, Mike Green's a really interesting guy because I think he knows how to rush the quarterback. I mean, he's not as good an athlete as some of these other guys. He probably isn't as long as you'd like. His arm length isn't great. So you're dealing with a guy that probably doesn't have exactly what you want from a measurable standpoint. But I thought his tape showed a diversified pass rush repertoire. I mean, he had a sense of how to attack offensive tackles. I thought that he did have a pretty desirable combination of lateral quickness, including a spin move. Plus, he did have that short stroke power we were speaking about to play off contact and the speed to power conversion, which is critical. And his hands were really active with multiple techniques. I really liked him. I mean, they played Ohio State, and obviously they lost something like 51-7. That's what you would expect. It's Marshall. But he had some really good pass rushes against the right tackle for Ohio State, who I looked him up. I think he would, he's obviously a pretty good recruit. But, I mean, he showed up in that game that he could play against that caliber of competition and play well. I mean, he stood out.
All right, good stuff. Let's go to Texas A&M and talk about Nick Scorton.
Yeah.
Is it Scorton?
Scorton.
Scorton. Okay.
Nick Scorton's a fascinating guy. I actually watched him last summer when he was at Purdue and led the Big Ten in sacks. And then, of course, he transferred to Texas A&M and watched him again this year, obviously. It's funny. I thought that he looked better in 2023, but the traits are still there. Now, he's not quite as long as you would ideally like. He's 6'2 3/4. Arm length is 33. I think Scorton, though, he definitely has the size, quickness, power profile that you want to see in edge pass rushers. And I think that he's a guy that it's there with him. I mean, it's definitely all there. And even though I thought he was better in 2023, you're dealing with a guy that has heavy hands. He's got a really good one-arm stab, which, by the way, that is something that is a power move. Like I said, it's not just running into guys. A one-arm stab is a power technique. And he's got heavy hands. He's got counters to his game. I feel like he knows how to rush the quarterback. So I'm very anxious to see if that translates to the league. So, but I think he's probably, to me, one of the most intriguing guys because I think it's all there within him. And then it's just a matter of, can it come out at the next level?
Well, Greg, let's stay at Texas A&M. Shamar Stewart, his teammate. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, he's the guy that I was kind of speaking about. He is a just off the charts, ridiculous athlete. I mean, when you see this guy on tape, guys, the way he moves, it's silly. I mean, I think he weighed 280 at one of the bowl games, but decided to lose weight for the Senior Bowl. I mean, for the combine, because at the combine he was 267. So he's 6'5", 267, 34 1/8 inch arms, wingspan almost 85 inches. This guy is an absolute. He ran a 4.59 40.
Oh my God.
40-inch vertical jump. This guy's an athletic freak. Okay, so you're dealing with a guy that is super sudden, explosive athleticism, strong, powerful, everything you would want in just a body. I mean, this guy is ridiculous, but he doesn't know how to rush the quarterback. So now he has to be taught that. And again, he's going to be a high pick. When I say high pick, who knows? I'm not good at deciding where guys go in the draft, as you guys know. But the guy's just an athletic freak.
Is he an end or a tackle? Does he play inside or outside? Both?
He's an end.
He's an end. Okay.
Oh, yeah, he's an end.
Gotcha.
I mean,
okay.
I'm not saying you could never move inside at him, but he's an end.
Gotcha.
So now you got to teach this guy how to rush the quarterback.
Yeah.
And because, and you never know. I can't answer that question. You never know. If it all were to come together, and it's not going to come together in a week, but if it all would come together, the guy could be a dominant force on the edge. If it doesn't come together, you're going to see a guy that just runs upfield and gets blocked in the NFL.
I mean, it can happen. We talked about Jalix Hunt last year, really a whole lot of refinement and coaching and tutelage, and he got it, and he started to look like a guy who not just was the passer. But
believe me, I hope this kid makes it, because watching this kid on tape, Jeff, watching him move, I mean, I've been doing this a long time, so I'm probably jaded. You know me, I don't go, oh my God, I've never seen anything like, because I've seen a lot of things. But this guy is just different, the way he moves for that size. I mean, he's a freakish athlete.
Nice.
Wow. Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right, well, we have to talk about guys from Georgia, Greg, because there's like 2.6% chance they become an Eagle. So let's talk about Michel Williams from Georgia.
Michel Williams, I actually met him briefly. He won the Maxwell Award a number of years ago, and I usually go to the Maxwell dinner when it was in Philly. I would go, and he was a high school kid going to Georgia at the time, and he was in a suit. And I got to tell you, if you just looked at him, you thought the guy was 30 years old, the way his body was. I mean, that's the way he looked when he was, 17 or 18. And again, you're dealing with a guy that's 6'5 plus, 260, 34 and 3/8 inch arms. He's a guy, when you watch his tape, the flashes that he shows of edge pass rush traits are ridiculous. I mean, he's got speed to power. He's got short stroke strength. He's got lateral quickness to play off contact. He's got a closing burst to the quarterback that's tremendous, but it's all there, but it doesn't show up as much as you would expect it to. So I'm a believer in Williams, just from the tape. I think that it's going to show up. I thought he improved in 2024, by the way, and that really gave me, a sense that it's going to continue to improve. He showed more consistent natural power. He showed an explosive sudden streak. There's a physical presence to this guy's game that was not really there in 2023. But this kid is, if it was all there on tape, all the time, this kid would be a top 5 pick. But it's not all there all the time. Gotcha. But if it comes together, and there's far more flashes with him, for instance, than Shamar Stewart, and they're both great athletes. With Williams, it's there. You see it. And once you see it, and that was the Bill Walsh philosophy, if you see it, then we can make it happen more often. So it's definitely there with this kid.
All right, Greg, moving on. This kid he's had a good offseason. Jonovan Isaac from Boston College. Interesting player. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, he is an interesting player. He's another guy that's kind of fun to watch. Boston College seemingly has, they put out guys in the league. It's kind of fun. But he's a really interesting guy. Now he's only 6'2 1/4, but he's got 34 plus inch arm. He's very similar in size to Aziz Ojulari, who the Eagles signed. The measurables are somewhat similar. But obviously 6'2 is considered a little short for edge pass rushers. But he's got long arms. He knew how to deploy them. He had some short stroke power. He had really quick, forceful strikes, and he kept his legs clean so he could maximize his quickness, so he could clear the arc on the high side and he could counter on the inside. So I thought that he has bend, he has flexibility, he has balance, he has body control. this kid's a really good pass rusher. Now he's only 248. Now you don't have to be 290 to be a pass rusher. So the question is, at 248, is that a factor, or is that not a factor? I mean, I think he'd begin his career as a sub defense pass rusher. He has joker attributes. You can move him around. I think he's more than likely, because he doesn't have the length. If you're going to play him in a base defense, I think he'd be an outside backer in a 5-2 front. But this kid can rush the quarterback, and he's a fun watch.
Is he a little bit like, maybe like the Colorado State kid last year who was on the Cowboys? What's his name? The edge rusher from the Cowboys. We were just talking about him too. Nealand, is it? Marshawn Nealand?
Oh, yes. Just
in how profiles?
Yeah. I mean, there's similarities. Yeah, you could probably say that. I really like Nealand too when he came out last year.
Yeah. All right, the next guy, Greg, we probably were sort of talking about similarly with Nolan Smith, another Georgia guy who there were some questions where this guy is going to best profile at the pro level, because the athleticism's there, but teams just aren't sure where exactly he fits. At Jaylen Walker from Georgia.
And I have those same questions. I mean, I was watching him with someone, and we were sitting here going, what is this guy? I mean, he's 6'1", 243. His arm length's only 32 inches. Yeah, I mean, this guy obviously is a quick, sudden, explosive athlete. Anybody could see that. My daughters could see that. I mean, that's the easy part. The question is, what is he at the next level? I mean, he's really built more like a stacked backer. I don't have a brilliant answer to this question, guys. I mean, obviously he can rush the quarterback. I don't think he's a great stacked backer prospect. That's just my opinion. Others may disagree. And that, hey, as I always tell you guys, reasonable people can watch it and have different points of view. I'm totally fine with that. I'm not sitting here saying what I'm saying is 100% right. He's a really explosive athlete. I mean, there's nothing that he can't do from a physical athletic standpoint. I just kept saying to myself, whoever drafts him, and obviously whoever drafts him is going to have a plan. They're not going to draft him on a whim randomly. But I'm curious what are they drafting him as? So in other words, when they go to the first day of OTAs, and they're just out there in their shorts and a T-shirt, and the defensive coach says, okay, let's line up in our base defense. Where is he? That's what I keep saying in my head. Where is he? Mm-hmm. Because he's not a defensive end in a 4-3. So sure. If your base defense is 5-2, where is he? Is he on the edge, on the outside? Is he a stack backer? I kept going back and forth in my head on that. And to be honest with you, I didn't come up with a brilliant answer. But the guy is explosive. He's sudden. He certainly can rush the quarterback.
This sounds like the type of guy that the Brian Flores is and the Todd Bowles of the world figure out a way. Yeah.
That's a great point, Jeff. Great point. The kind of guy that is, and I hate to be cliched, but in some ways it's that positionless thing where they sort of, the Flores thing is really interesting. That was a great guy to bring up.
Yeah.
Greg, one more guy, and I know Eagle fans have brought this up, other fans of other teams have brought Jack Sawyer from Ohio State. Should be a top 40 pick. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I got to tell you, and with me, nothing's personal. The tape, I'm not sure what Jack Sawyer is. He's not really a pass rusher. He's a solid football player. My guess is he's not going to play in your sub defenses because he's not a pass rusher.
Oh boy.
So, I think that, he's about 260 and he's over 6'4". So he's probably a D end in a 4-man front. But I think could he play outside backer in a 5-man front? Possibly. But I think he's just one of those guys that's like, oh, he's a solid football player. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's any wow trait to Jack Sawyer. So whether he's a top 40 pick, look, this is a different draft because, we don't have 5 or 6 quarterbacks, although you never know how all this is going to play out. As you guys know, sure. You start to hear that Jackson Dart might go 7th to the Jets. So who knows how this is going to play out with quarterbacks. But, Sawyer's just, to me, one of those solid guys. I've talked to people I really respect, and a lot of people say to me, he's really in an ideal world, he's a 2nd or 3rd round pick, because he's not really a pass rusher. Right. He's just I know I'm repeating myself because that's just the way it is, but he's just one of those really solid kind of foundational guys, but there's not a wow factor to his game.
Right. But, there's some value if you get a guy like that.
Without quite, no. We're not saying, believe me, those guys are critical to a defense.
Sure.
But, we're talking about, like Adam mentioned, top 40 pick, and he may well be. We have no idea. And Adam could be 100% right. And I know you guys talk to people, and maybe you've heard different things than what I just said. And Adam, if you have, please tell me.
Second round, I don't see him going the first, but he look. Fans ask about him. He's on our list.
Well, and he had that sack against Quinn Ewers in the championship game that everybody remembers.
Right.
Sure, and it's a big time program.
I mean, it was a big time play and a big time moment.
The gifted interception against Michigan in the end zone, right? That was him.
So I mean, he's actually a good football player. He's just, to me, not an edge pass rusher.
Yeah, listen, if you're a team like the Cowboys and you got to get stronger up front and be a little tougher, and you're trying to stop the run, and you have a good stable of pass rushers, and you want to draft this guy, if you can get him in the third to play first and second down, and then that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, Vinny Curry played that role.
My guess is he's the kind of guy that's going to play in the NFL for 12 years and be a really solid player.
Right.
He just might not be getting 17 sacks.
Right. There you go. All right. Last one, Craig. I know you wanted to highlight an LSU kid named Braden Swinson.
Braden Swinson. Yeah, he's a guy that I've been watching because LSU always has players, as you know. I really like this kid. He's almost 6'4". He's 255. I think this kid really knows how to use his hands exceptionally well as a player, and that's very, very rare for college players. And I'm really intrigued by this kid. He's a loose-hipped athlete. He's got really good body control. He's strong. He's got some bend to him. I really like this kid. Again, I have no idea where he's going to go. Who knows? Maybe he goes in the 4th round. I can't tell you that stuff. But the more I've watched him, and, of course, I see a lot of the SEC because they've got 1 million players every year. I just think this guy's a fascinating prospect.
Nice. All right, Braden Swinson from LSU. That's about 10 guys that we got in there. Big, diverse group of edges that will be fun to watch where they go in the NFL draft. That is going to do it for the Intel. I'm sorry. Yeah, the Intel with Greg Cosell. For Greg Cosell and Adam Kaplan, I'm Jeff Mosher. We'll catch you all on the next one.